Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our February 29th Leap Year Day webinar, very special webinar because it's on a very special day, the ins and outs of the Corporate Transparency Act and its impact on associations. I appreciate all of you guys jumping on and joining us for this webinar. And I know you have probably been more than inundated with articles and webinars and whatever else on this wonderful, beautiful document, this act. And so my goal today is, other than just to do a brief kind of overview of the act and what it's supposed to do and what it means, I really want to dive into more of the practical piece of it. In other words, the registration piece, and then also kind of the practical issues associated with complying with this act for our associations. So that's really the goal of today's webinar. And without further ado, I will give you the latest meme. Thank you. Feel free to snort if you think it's really funny. All right, so a couple of housekeeping things. I am Alina Gilbert. I will be presenting today, and you can probably guess that from the memes. And in front of you on the bulk of your screen should be the PowerPoint presentation. So you should be looking at Pink Floyd at this point. And on the left side is the video of me, hello. On the right side, you will see a chat icon. So please use this as you have questions that come up during the presentation. I want to save all questions to the end just to make sure we have enough time to get through everything that there is. And then hopefully we have some time at the end to go over questions. You will get 1 CMCA credit for this, and it will be automatically generated and emailed to you probably within the next 24 to 48 hours. If you don't see in the next day or so, please reach out to our education coordinator, Jessa Ledesma, you can either call her directly, 303-991-2086, or you can email her at jledesma@altitude.law. You can also reach out to Jessa if you're having any technical difficulties, although before doing that, if you're having trouble hearing or seeing, there's a little kind of button at the bottom that says something like no sound, no video, click here. So click that button first because it's going to take you through a series of steps and hopefully fix whatever the problem is. But after that, if you still aren't hearing or seeing, please reach out to Jessa and we will see if we can get you on the right track. And then finally, for those of you who have taken our webinars recently, just remember there is a survey that pops up at the end of the webinar. If you've got time and you're willing, please respond, please provide your feedback. That's how we get better at our presentations. That's how we know what you like and what you don't like. So please, if you have time, it would be very much appreciated. Thank you. All right, now, are you ready to talk about the Corporate Transparency Act, otherwise known as the CTA? I'm envisioning a big rah behind me. Yes, Alina, we're ready. All right. So like I said, we are going to talk about the basics of it, but then I really want to delve into the practical issues. So what is the CTA? Well, this is federal legislation. We don't have to deal with federal legislation a whole heck of a lot, especially not new federal legislation. Typically, we're busy dealing with the state. But in this case, this is federal. It's at the federal level. And the goal, really, of this legislation was to protect the United States from illicit activities. And the statute goes on to provide examples such as money laundering, financing terrorism, human and drug trafficking, all sorts of horrible things that, could happen. Obviously, we don't typically see those kinds of things with associations, but we do fit under the scope. And I'll tell you why in a minute, and you probably already know why. But the way that the corporate or the federal government has decided to deal with this is to require corporate reporting of beneficial owner information to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is a federal arm of the government, and we refer to it fondly as FinCEN. So you will know what I'm talking about when I say FinCEN. And we are going to also talk about what that means to report, what a corporate agency is, what a beneficial owner is, next. So who has to comply with this law? Well, basically corporations and limited liability companies, because 99.9% of our associations are set up as nonprofit corporations. We fall under the broad swoop of this act. And there are no exceptions for HOAs per se, and therefore we are stuck with it. Now, I will tell you that CAI on a national level is out there actively trying to get an exception for associations. It's trying to at least extend the reporting requirements for us for another year. But as far as I know, this has not yet happened. And so we have to keep moving forward as if nothing's going to change. So there are exemptions to this act. And it's actually about 18 or 20 of them, but there's only 2 that could, in rare instances, apply to an association. And that is a large organization and a tax-exempt organization. Let's talk about each one separately. So a large organization has, first of all, 20 or more employees. Notice the and or in red. There's a reason. And then you have $5 million in gross receipts and has a physical office. So the reason and/or is in red is because it's not entirely clear from the statute which one it is. There are different opinions out there. I know that CAI National takes the position that it's or. My personal reading of it and our firm's reading is that it's and, but who really knows what it is? So kind of keep that in mind. And this really wouldn't apply to most of our associations unless there's like some huge, mega association that truly, has more than 20 employees, $5 million in gross receipts. I mean, so that would be a pretty large master community that would fall under that. And most communities would not. And then the other possible exemption would be the tax exempt organization. And I know there are a lot of folks who say, oh, well, we're nonprofit, so therefore we fall under this exemption. Well, no, unfortunately, that's not the case. Being nonprofit is not the same thing as being non-exempt. Nonprofit simply means we're not selling shares of stock to the public. So in order to qualify as a 501c company under the Internal Revenue Code, typically you're going to have to be some sort of like a religious organization, an education-based organization, charitable, public safety, or scientific. Those are like the kind of the big ones to fall under a 501c exemption. And most of our associations just don't fall under that and therefore are not exempt. So I know, I don't remember when, but a few weeks ago, there was some email being circulated from someone basically finding some portion of the revenue code that said associations don't have to pay taxes, and therefore arguing that associations are therefore exempt. Well, I think the problem with that position is that the statute says you have to be an organization that is described in 501c of the Internal Revenue Code. You can't just be exempt and not be a 501c corporation. And so therefore, that language that was cited was kind of separate and apart from the designation of an organization as a 501c, and therefore it does not necessarily exempt associations from this reporting requirement. All right. I apologize, I need my coffee today so I don't fall asleep talking about all this titillating information for you. All right, now how do we comply? So the reporting company, that term is used throughout the statute. The reporting company is really the association. It's the entity that has to report, right? It's the corporation, it's the limited liability company. What kind of information does FinCEN want with respect to the corporation? It wants the legal name, it wants a trade name if there is one, a business address, the state where the corporation was created. So for us, obviously, it's going to be Colorado, and a tax ID number. That's the basic information that we're going to need to provide. And we're going to go through in some more detail and look at the actual screens here in a minute. But then, as you recall, we also have to report on our beneficial owners. And again, we'll talk about who falls under that category in a minute. But beneficial owners have to provide their legal name, their date of birth, their address, and then an identifying number that you'd find like on a passport, a driver's license, a state-issued ID. And then you also have to submit a photograph of that document that has that number on there, okay? And I know that in of itself is causing a lot of stress in the industry. So there's also a duty to update. And the duty to update is anytime there's a change, you have 30 days to update the records. And, you know, the statute and the instructions, they all make a distinction between updating information and correcting information. And there's really two separate options for that when we go into the system, and I'll show you. But if you're updating, it means something has changed and we're updating the information. A correction would be if you realize you inadvertently put in something that was inaccurate and you want to go ahead and correct it. So those are two different things as far as FinCEN is concerned. And so there's two different boxes to check. By the way, if you look up on top, we have to, unless something changes, everyone needs to be registered by December 31st of this year. Okay, I know some folks are saying January 1st of 25, but the actual language in the statute was December 31st of 2024. So that is the deadline. And I think later on, we'll talk a little bit about when we should register and what would be best for associations at this point. All right. So who are these beneficial owners we keep talking about? They must be very special. Well, they are. They're individuals who directly or indirectly exercise substantial control over a corporation, or individuals who own or control 25% or more of the entity. So when we talk about individuals who exercise substantial control over the corporation, there are examples provided as to what that means. So anyone who serves in a capacity as a director or officer is deemed to exercise substantial control. Anyone who has authority to like appoint or remove officers, which in our case, it's the board generally, directs or determines or has substantial influence over important decisions like expenditures. Again, board manages the budget, approval of operating budget. The board approves the initial budget and then it goes to the homeowners. And entering into contracts, that's the board, right? Amending governing documents, well, the initiative is on the board and some documents may be amended by the board without owner vote. So all of these examples solidify the fact that what we're really, really talking about here when we talk about beneficial owners are the board members. It's not just like the board president or the secretary or someone who holds an office. It's basically any director on the board, whether they hold an office or they don't hold an office. As far as the second category of beneficial owners, individuals who own or control 25% or more of the entity, we don't typically see that. The best example I can think of is if you have a lot of investors in a community and they buy up all the units, and you've got an investor who owns a quarter or more of all the units, that would probably trigger a requirement to report. If you have a developer-controlled community where the developer decides to annex a whole bunch of lots or units that they still own and haven't transferred to a third-party owner, and that equals more than 25%, then that developer would have the duty to register as a beneficial owner as well. Okay. But generally, this is what we are referring to with respect to beneficial owners and substantial control. So now I'd like to start actually going through the actual, like what you're going to see on the screen when you go to register. And prior to doing this, I know when you guys got the email with the PowerPoint, there were also some links in there as far as, documents that can help. And we're going to have another slide at the end with those links. But one of the best documents that I actually pulled off their website was called the step-by-step instructions on how to file. And they actually go screen by screen by screen through every single thing that you're going to see. And then they have notes on each side and they tell you what to do. So if you want a copy of that, obviously you can click on the links at the end, or the ones that we emailed you, and it'll take you to just like the general help section. And in there, you can find the step-by-step guide and print it out and have it. It's really a great resource. I looked at it quite a bit when I was preparing for this particular webinar. Okay, whew. All right. So when you go to the website, and there's the website right there, you are going to get a screen that, well, first you're going to have a welcome screen, and there's going to be options on the right kind of upper side that says beneficial ownership information reporting, and then it's going to have a Bank Secrecy Act reporting. And obviously you want to click on the beneficial ownership reporting, which they create a wonderful acronym for. It's BOI, BOI. So you go to the BOI. And then when you go to the BOI, you're going to get this. And there's a little bit more on the bottom that I didn't put on here because I think it's somewhat irrelevant. But there's two options for you to register an association. So, and I apologize, I know it's kind of blurry and hard to read, but I just wanted you to have an idea of what you would be looking at. So there's the PDF version and the web version of how you're going to do this. The information you have to provide is exactly the same. In the PDF version, you need to make sure you have Adobe Reader installed on your computer if you're going to use that, because essentially it's going to generate a PDF document that you can fill in online, and then you can save it and come back to it, and then once it's done, you file it. Otherwise, you do the online filing, and that is essentially where the screens come up that we're going to go through today, and you fill them in as you go, and then you submit. Okay. All right, so I'm going to assume you have picked, we're just going to do this on the web. Okay. So it's going to give you a warning, everything you enter has to be truthful, blah, blah, blah. And you click I agree, and then you go to this screen right there in front of you right now. So if you take a look at this, and you might have to get kind of close to your computer and see, I'm towards the top there. Do you see how there's categories? Like right now, the filing information is highlighted in blue, and then there's reporting company, company applicants, beneficial owners, and submit. Those are the steps we're going to go through. And as you click through the slides, and through the, the various windows, they move on to the next section automatically. So here, it's the filing information. And so for those of you who are doing the first filing, you're obviously going to click on Initial Report. And then you can see there's options to correct the report and to update a prior report, which is what we were talking about. There's a difference between updating and correcting. And then there is a newly exempt entity option. So obviously, if somehow you fall into one of the exemptions we talked about, you would click on that one. And some people have asked me, well, how do we say, what do we have to do for exempt? Yes, you still have to go into this and give the name and everything, but you do click on the exempt piece, and that's all you're really going to need to do at that point then. But you do still have to register the name and that you are an exempt entity. I just moved on, as you can see up on the top, to the reporting company. But before we head that way, I want to talk about the FinCEN number. And as you can see up on top of this slide, there, and it's a little blue box, it's highlighted blue, and it says request to receive a FinCEN ID. So what's a FinCEN ID? It's an ID, it's a number that's assigned. In this case, it would be to the reporting company, so to the HOA, so that when you go to update records or you go to register a new beneficial owner, you don't have to retype all the information. You could type in the FinCEN ID number, and then you won't have to type the rest of the stuff in. So I think it's worth it to request a FinCEN number. So you can avoid having to type in a whole bunch of information afterwards. Okay. So then it's going to start asking you, I don't know if you can read that, but it says reporting company legal name. Your legal name is the name that is on the articles of incorporation. It's not what you casually go by. It's not what your declaration says. It's the name on the articles of incorporation. So if you are registering the HOA, make sure that's where you are pulling the name from. An alternate name is not like a nickname of the association. It is if we've truly, if we have filed something with the Secretary of State, that's a DBA or a trade name, you would put it in there. But if you haven't filed it with the Secretary of State, I would not be putting in any names in that slot. I would just skip it. All right. Next. All right. So the next one, and this one I really, really struggled with, and that is the company applicant. There is not a really good definition of what this means. And the best we could do is I did find an article that tries to define it. And basically what it says is the company applicant is the person who is responsible for all the filing on behalf of the reporting corporation. Okay, so in my best guess, that is the person who's actually filling all of this out, and the person who is submitting the information. So there is a whole bunch of information that needs to get submitted for this person. And so that includes the name. It includes what's the reporting company you're submitting it on behalf of. If you have a FinCEN number, obviously you can put that in, and then that pulls up the information and kind of go from there. It makes it easier. But it's a little bit unnerving to me, at least, that the person who is submitting the information is required to provide this kind of registration on their own behalf as well, in addition to the actual corporation. All right. So then we go on to the beneficial owners. And the beneficial owners, again, it's the same type of thing. Now, One thing I do want to point your attention to, and this is on all the various slides, if you look at on the window, it says form of identification and issuing jurisdiction. Underneath that, it says need help. Well, if you kind of go to the right of that, you'll see a little arrow mark. And if you press on that arrow mark, it's actually going to pull up a text box, and it's going to give you additional information and an explanation of what they are looking for. So it's a neat little tool, and these arrow marks are throughout all the different entries that you have to make. There is one for just about everything in there. So again, if you're not sure what you need to do and you don't have any resources in front of you, you can always click on that arrow, and that it will give you some more information to help you out with what you need to do. So as we said before, with the beneficial owners, we're really talking about board members, and we're going to need to, someone's going to need to enter that information for them, as far as what's your legal name, what's your address, what is your birthday, and then your identifying number. And as you can see at the bottom there's a little rectangle that says drag your file here or your folder here. So that's where you would drag the file that has the photo of your ID and submit it, and click next. So then there is the submission page. And I only did a picture of the very bottom of the submission page because that's really kind of the scary thing. But above that, what it does is it asks for the submitter's email address, their first name, and their last name. And then you click that little box that says, I agree. So if you read above that, it says, I certify that I'm authorized to file this BOIR on behalf of the reporting company. I further certify on behalf of the reporting company that the information contained in this report is true, correct, and complete. I agree. So you are certifying, if you're the person submitting the information, that what you're submitting is accurate. If you read the yellow text box, it's a compliance reminder that says that a willful failure to report complete beneficial ownership information to FinCEN, or the willful failure to update. So remember, there's a 30-day update period. Let's see, or a willful provision of false or fraudulent information. So basically, anytime you willfully put in the wrong information or you fail to put in information, you are subject to civil and criminal penalties. Okay, so what are those penalties? Well, $500 a day, up to $10,000 total, and up to 2 years imprisonment. So the big question to me is, who is responsible for these penalties? It's not clear from the statute who is actually the responsible entity or person for this. So we would obviously think that the responsible entity would be the reporting company, the HOA. But you can't put an HOA in prison, right? So who would FinCEN go after if the information is not correct? Would it be the individual beneficial owner? Would it be the person who actually submitted the information and just click to the I agree on this? We're not 100% sure. And it's kind of the not knowing, that's the scary part. And I think that's what's got a lot of people kind of up in arms as far as, well, who's going to do the registration? I don't know that I want to expose myself to this, right? So this is kind of that scary part. The registration process itself is pretty straightforward. You've seen the slides, sort of blurry slides. And for those of you who have already gone in, and I know some of you have, and messed with it, you see it's really not that big of a deal as far as completing it. But ultimately, it's this looming responsibility to make sure you enter information correctly, and that you update it within 30 days, and that you correct it if you realize you entered something not correctly. The one thing as an attorney that makes me feel better about this is it's a willful failure. If you read through the yellow text box, everything is a willful failure. Willful to me means it's beyond negligence. It's beyond like there was an oversight. It is you meant to lie. You meant to omit. You did this with an intention. And I would suspect in our case, I mean, whoever does the filing isn't going to be doing anything with intention because why, right? So, you know, this penalty, even though it sounds really heavy and burdensome, it really may not apply to situations where it was just a mistake or you didn't have the information or something like that. But again, until we see the enforcement piece of this, how do we know, right? It's fear of the unknown. But that's essentially the reporting piece of it. But beyond that, we have a whole bunch of practical issues that I really want to talk to you about for the next half of this class. Maybe it doesn't look like a lot, but I think there's a lot that goes into this. So who's going to file the initial report? And then the third bullet is who will file the updates. Again, there is a lot of fear in saying, yes, I will be the one who files this, right? There is concern over the liability aspect. What if I report something incorrectly? What if I don't know that there's been an update on the board and I didn't report it? Am I going to jail? Am I facing a $10,000 fine? What am I doing here? So, you know, and so I've seen a lot of folks pointing kind of fingers saying, well, I'm not doing it, and I'm not doing it. And I'll just give you an overall sense of what I'm seeing personally is most management companies I talk to, at least right now, are not wanting to do the filing. I know some are. I've talked to some that are comfortable doing the filing for their associations. Most law firms that I'm aware of do not want to do the filing. If you're wondering whether Altitude is going to do the filing, we are still looking at that option. So we are examining it. We will let you know as soon as we make a decision as to whether we will facilitate the filing for our associations. But again, we are also concerned with the liability piece. And so it requires a little bit of digging on our part to see what we can do as far as protecting ourselves, right? There are some boards that are saying, you know, we'll just do it ourselves. We don't care, you know, and so there's different attitudes, but ultimately people are nervous about it. And so now is a good time to start thinking about who is an appropriate individual or who is willing to be the person that's doing that filing on behalf of the corporation and on behalf of the beneficial owners. Now, when should the first report be filed? That's another kind of practical question, because you could file it today if you wanted to, right? Because it's open, registration's open, and it has to be done by the end of the year. Given the efforts of CAI National folks, I think it's better personally to wait at least until the second half of the year before filing anything, just in case they make headway with at least an extension or some sort of exemption for associations. I would recommend waiting. My personal opinion, and I know attorneys all kind of differ on this, my personal opinion is probably to wait till August before doing anything. But I know some folks are saying, well, why wait? We're gonna, you know, we need to do this anyway, so we're just gonna rip off that Band-Aid. But most attorneys that I know are recommending to wait for the time being until we kind of know for sure whether or not CAI made some headway, or at least until the second half of the year. One thing I did want to mention that I forgot, when we talk about who will file the report, there are third-party reporting companies out there who will do this for a fee. Of course, everyone will do it for a fee, right? But so these reporting companies, I have been in contact with at least one of them, and they basically, it seems like they charge an annual fee to keep, you know, the FinCEN report updated. here's my one issue and one concern is if you do reach out to one of these companies, you definitely want to make sure they understand the workings of an association and that and how the boards turn over and how it's not necessarily the same throughout the year. We have board members who are being removed. We have board members who resign. We've got new ones being appointed or elected. And so it's not like a for-profit corporation, like a bank or someone or whatever that has a pretty steady board of directors that doesn't need to do a whole lot of updating. We are a different animal. And I would encourage any of you who talk to third-party companies that will do the registrations, please make sure they understand that so that we're not setting them and ourselves up to fail if you use those companies. Okay. Personal identifying information. This is really, really big. So as we've already talked about, our board members will be submitting copies of either like their driver's licenses, their passports, state IDs, whatever it is that they have, probably mostly driver's licenses, I would guess. And they're submitting pictures of that and through the association. And Colorado has some statutes that talk about personal identifying information and basically say if you are an entity that possesses personal identifying information of an individual, you need to have some kind of a policy in place that talks about how you're going to protect this information from kind of getting out into the world, okay? And so a lot of associations already have these policies, but not all do. So I would very much encourage all of your communities to adopt one of these policies sooner rather than later. It is essentially, it's a very straightforward policy. It talks about kind of like, here is what is considered to be personal identifying information. Here are the methods we use with respect to keeping this information safe. Here is the process we use with respect to destruction of this information. And that's really all it is. And like I said, it is very straightforward, and technically the law requires us to have these if we are in possession, whether it's electronic or paper format. If we have a copy of someone's driver's license, we really need to have this policy in place. So please, like I said, if your communities don't have one, please encourage them to get one. They are very inexpensive. Okay. Which kind of takes me to the next point, which is, will people still want to run for the board? I'm hearing a lot of concern about nobody's going to want to run for the board. Okay, nobody's going to want to run for the board because nobody's going to want to put themselves out there. Well, if the concern is that people are not going to want to submit a copy of their driver's license to FinCEN, I don't understand that personally. You're like, Alina, you're so stupid. No, I really don't understand. If somebody wants a copy of our ID, that ID already exists in virtual land. I mean, when it was issued, it exists in virtual land. It exists in someone's database. So it's not like it's never been out there before. If somebody really wants to steal an ID, they're going to do it whether you file with FinCEN or not. So I don't understand what their concern is with, submitting a copy of your driver's license to a federal agency. It's not like they don't already have stuff about you in their system. They already have your social security number, they have your passport. It's not going to, like I said, I just don't understand what the concern is, because there's already avenues for people to get that information about you. And this, I doubt, creates a whole lot more opportunities than any other type of website or anything that already has that information. So again, if people don't want to run for the board, I do get it, but I think owners need to be reminded that, look, this isn't that big of a deal. Your driver's license is already in virtual world. So And this is going to be with the federal government. Yes, somebody can break in and get it, but they can do the same thing with your credit card, and you've got that stored everywhere. And you probably have your driver's license on your iPhone now because we can do that. And so it's out there. Okay. So I would just remind owners of that if there is a concern about, having to register, it's not like it's not out there. And then finally, this is really important, I think. This is ensuring board member compliance. Remember, there is a liability exposure here if we provide inaccurate information or incomplete information, or we fail to disclose a beneficial owner. And so there is legitimate concern to say, well, what do we do if an owner gets elected to the board, but then they don't register? That exposes everyone to liability. It exposes the whole, the association to liability, exposes whoever filed the report to liability. I mean, it's scary. So we do have a few recommendations, and we will be sending out blogs and blast emails on all of this. So you'll see it again. But kind of the biggest recommendation is to amend your bylaws under board qualifications to say that if you're elected to the board, or one of the qualifications of being elected to the board is within 30 days of when you are elected, you are required to comply with all state and federal reporting requirements, including the CTA, okay? And so what that does, and then it'll say if, you don't qualify, then you're not eligible to sit on the board, and you're not on the board. So what that essentially does is we have a 30-day update period with CTA. So we have a homeowner who's elected, they have 30 days to submit this information so that it may be uploaded. If they don't submit it, they are not eligible to be on the board, and they're off the board, which means we're not complying because that person isn't a board member, so there's nothing to disclose at that point, and we have not failed to comply and update the information within 30 days. So I think this is a really, really important amendment to the bylaws that all our associations should be doing. Now, if you are on the board or managing an association that was created after Kiowa, so after July 1, 1992, you absolutely positively have to get homeowner approval for this type of an amendment. Changing any board qualifications require owner approval. Typically, it's a majority of those who are voting, as long as at least the quorum of owners vote. However, you have to look at your bylaws and see what they say. So you do need to get homeowner approval. If you are managing or on the board of a pre-Kiowa community, you have to look at what your bylaws say. If your bylaws say you can amend the bylaws without owner approval, then you can, because that prohibition that's in Kiowa doesn't apply to you because you're pre-Kiowa. But if you have to have homeowner approval based on what you have in your bylaws, then you're still going to need to get homeowner approval. So for your post-Kiowa communities, even if you have some sort of a provision that says the board may unilaterally amend, again, you cannot do that. Kiowa specifically requires homeowner approval for any modifications to board qualifications. Next. Okay. A conduct of meetings policy in which you also add the criteria that all board members will promptly register as required by state or federal laws. And that's fine. I just keep in mind that if you're doing it through a policy like this, you can't force someone off the board if they fail to comply. And that's really the crux of it is, I mean, yeah, so they fail to comply, they're still going to be on the board, and you're still going to be, as an association, in violation of the CTA requirements. So having just a policy on this is not going to be enough. You absolutely want to make sure you have the bylaws amendment in there too. And kind of the third piece of this is you really want to make sure that your owners understand what they're getting into when they run for the board or before they run for the board, which means you can have something going out in a newsletter or in your solicitation for, board member candidacies. You want to disclose that because of new reporting requirements, you will be required to provide a copy of either your driver's license or your passport for federal filing requirements, however you want to put it. So that is something we are also very much recommending, is to make sure homeowners are on notice before they run or before the election is held, at least, so they know, and to have your bylaws specifically require that they comply with the all reporting requirements. And then, of course, the conduct of meetings policy is good in addition to both of these, but alone it's not going to be enough. Okay. I know we have tons and tons of questions, so I think we are going to have some time to go through those. So these are the resources I was telling you about. The very bottom is the FinCEN help page, and that's got links to a whole bunch of stuff, including the step-by-step instructions on how to register. So check out all of these. The top one is just that initial registration page that I showed you. So these are all very helpful. They did a good job with providing information, and it can definitely assist. Let's sit back for a minute. All right. So I am going to start at the beginning of these questions. I can almost guarantee I will not be able to go through all of them because there's so many in here, but I will go through as many as I can. And if I don't get to your question, looks like there's like 49 in here. Wow. If I don't get to your question, please just send me an email. Here's my email address, and I will try to respond timely with answers. All right. For some reason, my little mouse is not working to get me to the top of these chats. Interesting. Okay. I am going to read from the bottom for now because I can't get to the top of the questions. I apologize. So let's see. Can you state the cost of having Altitude draft the PII, the personal identifying information policy? We are currently charging $100 for it, flat fee. Do HOA dues qualify as the $5 million or more in gross receipts? Yes, because that's usually how most associations get their income, is through their assessments and dues. So that definitely can be part of the $5 million for sure. Let's see. Would Altitude help us with the correct wording for changing the bylaws? Yes, absolutely. We're actually now putting when we redraft documents. So if any of you have any documents that are in the process of being redrafted by our firm, we are automatically putting in the new language. And so you are all set there, but we can definitely do a limited amendment for your community to add that language in. So just reach out to whoever the attorney is that you normally work with at our office, and they can help you out with that for sure. Can the business address be care of the management company if we end up helping the associations to comply? I believe the business address can be the management company, especially if you are currently serving as the principal address with the Secretary of State, in other words, where all the records are kept. I think that is going to be appropriate to use as the address. It seems to me that owners have substantial control as well. They have final say on the budget. Although that is true, they do have, final say on a lot of things. They are not, by this definition, considered to be beneficial owners unless they own 25% or more. It's really just the board members, because, oh my goodness, can you imagine if all the homeowners had to register? We'd never be in compliance. Wow. What if an individual is on the board and also controls 25% or more of the association? Only one registration or two? I think only one registration is needed. There's nothing in this process that requires you to distinguish between I'm registering because I'm on the board or I'm registering because I own 25% or more. So I think one registration is absolutely fine. Does the HOA get the information from the board and submit it, or can they log on themselves? So someone's going to need to create the initial report for the association as the reporting company. And then hopefully you get a FinCEN number. And then certainly you can say to your board members, you know, here's the link, go register, use this FinCEN number, and then add your information in. The key is going to be making sure that they do actually register so that we are in compliance. Would a management company typically be primarily responsible for performing this filing and any updates thereafter, akin to the DORA filings? Again, I think it is really up to each individual management company to decide whether or not it is comfortable with the risks that we talked about, just like it's up to each individual law firm to decide whether they are or not comfortable with the risks. So, you know, we've kind of talked about it today, and I think it's going to fall on the management company owners to make that decision. But I think the biggest concern, like I said, is there's these civil and criminal penalties, and how do we ensure, especially like for us as attorneys, we don't typically get information and updates on the boards. So for us, it's pretty scary, because how do we ensure we're getting all the information so we can accurately report? So again, I think it's a decision based on the company and what it is and is not comfortable with. Do you have to register annually? If so, is it on the same day every year like the Secretary of State, or is it by the end of each year? So it's not annual. You have to do your initial registration, and then you have a duty to keep it updated within 30 days of any changes, or within 30 days of when you discover any incorrect information. You don't have to go on every year at the same time, you know, and register it. You just need to keep it updated. Can you go over the impact this has on the beneficial owners that get submitted for CTA registration? How is their information used? So it's kept in, supposedly, according to FinCEN, it's kept in this secret, you know, triple secret database, and it's really only available under certain circumstances to certain agencies that have a legitimate purpose for requesting it, whether it be like a credit agency or something along those lines. It is not, people, like everyday people and companies can't just go to FinCEN and say, I want this information. They're not going to get it. There's some very specific requirements for when FinCEN will provide that information to anybody. So you don't have to worry about it being like public information and people being able to go and just get it. That's not how it's going to work, at least according to FinCEN. I have a hard time getting board members anyway. They are volunteers, and to have their personal information out there is going to make most of the board resign. Some of our board members are police officers, etc., who do not want that personal information out there. How do we convince them it's okay? I think it just, like I said, goes back to what I was saying initially. Information's already out there. If you think your driver's license isn't out there in cyber world, I think you're living a little bit under a rock. Please don't be offended, but it's already out there. So I really don't understand how this is, you know, submitting it to FinCEN makes it more out there. It's already there. The company applicant slide is missing from the PowerPoint. I know. So the PowerPoint handout that you guys have, it is missing the company applicant slide. And the reason is because I added it at the last minute after you guys already got a copy of it. So I'm really, really sorry. I apologize for that. But hey, good eye on that one. Must our sub-associations file in addition to the master association? Yes. So every sub-association is a corporation. So every corporation has to file. It doesn't matter if it's a sub or a master. If you are your own corporation, you have articles of incorporation, you must file and your board must file. So that's a great question. You don't have to fill out company applicants information if it's an existing company formed prior to January 1. If you hover over need help, it explains this. Look at that. Thank you. I apologize. I did not look at the help for that one. I only looked at the step by step, and it said that basically you need to have at least 1 or 2 company applicants. So this one is confusing, and I hope you are absolutely correct on that. I apologize, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. So that's something you probably want to look into further. Somebody else has a very similar comment. So again, if that's the case, I hope you are right, in which case if you were formed before this year, you don't have to worry about it. Will Altitude be offering an option to register their clients? Like I said, we are talking about it. We haven't made a final decision, but once we make a decision, that information is going to go out there to everybody, and you will know for sure. Can each board member enter their own information bypassing the management company, and will keep their information private from other board members that go in later to submit information for themselves? I mean, yeah. So I think even if the homeowners or the board members don't do it themselves, it doesn't mean that, like, if the management company says we're going to file this, I would not recommend that the management company give other board members copies of driver's licenses of, their fellow board members. That they should be kept separately and privately, and not disclosed to other board members. I think each board member is entitled to the privacy of what their driver's license or passport or whatever contains. So regardless of who's doing that registration, that information should be kept separate and apart. It's not information that is specific to the association. This is private personal information. Can the board members use a FinCEN number too? Yes, they can. So board members beneficial owners can create their own FinCEN. I honestly was thinking about it, and I didn't really see the benefit, because you're usually going to be a one and done. Like, you're going to register as a board member, and you probably don't have any need to go back in there to update anything, because if you move, then you're not a beneficial owner anymore because you have a different address. So it would just be a matter of getting you deleted. So I don't know how a FinCEN number for an individual board member is going to help, but yes, you can. There is an option to use or to get a FinCEN number for individual board members. Okay, let's see. Somebody wrote prison. Yep, prison. If a beneficial owner provides false data and the management company submits it in good faith, looks like the manager gets the violations. Well, I'm not sure. I think if you submitted in good faith, then the position is we didn't willfully provide inaccurate information. We filed what was given to us, and we really have no way of verifying this. And so we filed it. So I don't know that it necessarily exposes the person who's filing to liability. And that's kind of, like I said before, that's the question. That's what we're not sure of, because there's not a good explanation of this in the statute. So, but I would probably argue that because you're not willfully submitting false information, that you should be protected from liability. Oh, and it's 1 o'clock. Well, I got through half probably, so I apologize if I didn't get to yours. Please email me. Like I said, if I didn't answer your questions. And thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a continuing saga, and we will keep you updated. Thanks, everyone.